You know, it can be you, the one who glides through Excel without scrolling all over the place and just going to exactly where you need to be, because this video will get you there. It's about navigation, getting around the spreadsheet quickly and easily, and we're going to cover a few things such as shortcuts, go to, navigating through tabs, large spreadsheets, all of that good stuff. So let's get in, shall we? Navigation can refer to many things when we're talking about Excel spreadsheets. It can be navigation around a sheet, going from cell to cell, through a workbook, going from sheet to sheet, but also within the menus. So going to the different menus or commands or tools, or even when you're writing formulas, you can navigate into a formula. So uh, nothing's going to be better than the other. So a lot of people swear by keyboard commands, but it's a combination that'll give you the full benefit of working a bit faster and smarter. So a combination of mouse actions, so that can be left or right clicks or double clicks or scrolling even, if you've hopefully got a scroll on your mouse, and also any number of keyboard shortcuts and using keys in different ways. Let's first off get a couple of terminologies right here. So, when we're talking about a workbook, it's the file. The Excel file is the workbook that contains one or many sheets. Sheets being spreadsheets or worksheets. I prefer using worksheets, which are denoted by these tabs down below, each of these being a worksheet. So clicking in this case was pretty easy to move between the sheets. Also within this area of the worksheet, I can move quickly by clicking around with my mouse. Now, just as we defined what a workbook worksheet is just then, let's get some mouse actions together to make sure that everyone is familiar with everything I'm about to talk through. So when I say click, it's clicking the left mouse button. Now, clicking in a spreadsheet will take you to a cell. The second option with a mouse, of course, is using the secondary key. So that being referred to as a right click. Now, a right click of something in a spreadsheet or within the workbook will give you different results. Here I've right clicked a cell. So my options are all of these shortcut menu options to do certain bits and pieces. Now, if I right click somewhere else, like on a worksheet tab, I get things that relate now to the tab. You can see here, changing the tab color, protecting the sheet, linking to the sheet, selecting sheets, inserting, deleting and renaming, moving and copying, and so on. So that is a different result when we right click there in the worksheet or on the tab. Now, another thing is to scroll. Now, these areas left and right of the of the worksheet are referred to as the scroll bars. So they allow you to scroll up and down the workbook or left and right. And you'll see they'll go off the screen. One thing to note is the cell pointer doesn't change when you scroll. So that always remains in place. So something we'll come to a bit later on as well is this area here called the name box. Now that's denoting where we are within the workbook. Within the worksheet. Now, if I scroll across to the right, you can see it remains in F7. Click somewhere locally, and now we've moved the cell pointer, the name has changed. So that's a bit about scrolling with scroll bars. Here's big tip number 135. If we're up here in the ribbon, we can move through by clicking the tabs for each ribbon page, just like we do with the tabs down here. But if you use your scroll on your scroll wheel on your mouse, you'll see that you can scroll through without taking your finger off a button that you're already on, which is generally the scroll. So it's a nice little way to quickly move to something without having to line up and click. Boom. So bear that one in mind. So that's another use of scrolling. Now you might be familiar with dragging, but let's get it 100%. So clicking inside the cell pointer, not here on the fill handle, which will give us a different result, but clicking inside the cell pointer and dragging is selecting those cells. Now if we drag outside of one column, you can see we're selecting multiple cells. Drag back in, drag down, drag right, drag left. So dragging is a very useful technique, but sometimes it can come a cropper. For example, if we click and drag down the workbook, you can see it just flies away. La, 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 la. Now, if we happen to want to go to a specific cell, we'll have to put the brakes on, and we've probably missed it. Drag back. I'm sure you can appreciate this if you've used any sort of largish workbook before. And let's say I want to go to 198. So let's see if we can do it. That's not going to work too well, is it? So there must be a better way to do that. 198, where are you? There you are. So dragging through to selecting may not be the best thing to do all the time, but it can work well if you're actually on the worksheet area that you need to be without going off the screen. Okay, so there's some useful keys on the keyboard that will help us get around things. So let's flick the page and we'll have a look at those. Okay, so here we are on a worksheet with some data, just to help us demonstrate a few of these techniques with using some keyboard shortcuts. So first off, let's have a look at the control key. Control key is used in conjunction with a few things. For example, control key and page down and page up will move the workbook sheets. You can see down the bottom there, the worksheets. We're moving with page down, across to the right, page up, back up to the left. But if we're on the worksheet itself, control and the arrow keys are one of the techniques to get you around really quickly. So if we look at placing ourselves here on the top of a column, now what the control key and an arrow will work with is a continuous range of data. Okay, so note that because I'm going to hit control down. Notice how it stops here at row 59. Now if I just arrow down a bit more, you can see my data continues beyond that. But if I hit control up, what stops it is that there's a blank cell between the direction I'm pointing to and the data that I've got on the workbook. So the blank cell acts like a break. Now that works in all directions. If we come back up our workbook again, so clicking here on row 16, control right arrow this time, and it stops at this entry of New York because I've got a blank cell here in column K. Control right arrow again, stops once more because I've got something here beyond the blank cell to stop it. Okay, so control left, and we're now back at the edge of the spreadsheet. So with no data in between, Control Up goes all the way back up to A1. Now, I was just wondering if you'd like to see the edge of the spreadsheet. It's quite a big thing. So this worksheet contains, like all worksheets do, a number of rows and a number of columns. Now, it's hard to sort of work out how many columns there are because they're in this sequence of, once we get beyond the alphabet, we're into AA, AB, AC, ASO, and so on. Now, if I hit Control right arrow from here, guess what? I'm right at the edge of the spreadsheet now in column XFD. So I've just moved across 16,384 columns. Unbelievable. Now, if we go with a Control down arrow combination, we're now in the bottom right-hand corner of the spreadsheet, and that is now on XFD 1,048,576. What an address to be at. Now if I hit Control left arrow, because there's no data across the bottom of the spreadsheet, Control up arrow, and there you go. I'm back in A1 just with a couple of keystrokes. Super, super easy. Now, there's a key combination beyond the Control key, which is the use of home and end. And they're super useful as well. Now, if I tap the end key, you'll see down the bottom here on the status bar, it's telling me I'm now in end mode. So if I hit a directional key, an arrow key, such as the right one, it does the same thing as Control right. So end right arrow. So end, once again, note down the bottom on the status bar, down arrow, and I'm back down the bottom of the spreadsheet, bottom right hand corner. End left, end up, back to A1. Now, the use of home has a few other little features. For example, if I hit somewhere here on the spreadsheet, just anywhere, and hit the home key, it'll always take me back within that row to the first column, column A. So home will be a good way if you're way over here and you go, I need to get back home. Boom. Now, if we add control to that, Control home takes you back to A1. So that's a good way to get back somewhere with a bit of sanity, because we normally start our spreadsheet stuff, our entry, in that home area around the column A area. Now, home has some other useful things as well. Now, if I hit end followed by home, note where it takes me. Any guesses? Well, where it's taking me is the last column and last row with any data in it. Let's zoom out a bit and have a look. All right, so here's that long list of data. You can possibly even detect that blank row there, but that is the last row, last column with anything in it. Okay, so it's a very useful way to get, I find when I'm working with unfamiliar spreadsheets, that's the first thing I'll do. Tap end, tap home, and I'll find out where my data extends to on that worksheet. So Control home once again, as we did earlier, and we're back to A1. Now, super, super useful getting around a spreadsheet using the Control key combination with page up and page down between sheets, and the Control arrow keys, and the use of home and end, and in their various combinations. Now, a selection technique I hope you all use from now on. if you're trying to select down the spreadsheet as we did earlier, okay, you can introduce the shift key to make life a lot better for you. Now, first off, just to make life even better, let's get rid of this blank row here. Right click and choose delete. Blank row gone. Now, I want to select from B4 through the spreadsheet to the very bottom of this column. So if I hold the shift key, then control down arrow, bang, I've now selected the bottom of that column. Now, another way we can do this, if it's not very far away from where you need to be, is holding the shift key with a mouse click. Easy peasy. So instead of dragging through, possibly going too far, dragging back, up, down, whatever you need to do, and if you can see it on the worksheet, hold shift after you've selected the first cell that you want to select from, shift and click the last cell. Let go and you've got it selected. So that's for the use of selecting in formulas, formatting, whatever areas you need to select a range of cells. Now, it can also work this way. I've got my mouse has selected the first cell in that column again, drag down using the scroll bar, shift and click the bottom. Now we've selected everything in between again. Super easy, no scrolling past and scrolling backwards and forwards. So I hope you will use the shift key for your selections from now on. Okay, so in addition to navigating around the workbooks and worksheets, let's have a look at some data entry just to make sure that you are aware of the two different techniques for data entry, because that's also navigating inside your workbooks. So I'll just add a quick little heading here. Code can be anything. Now, if I'm entering down a column, hitting the enter key moves you down a cell at a time by default. You can change that. Okay, so if you're entering, you go down the workbook that way. Now, if you're needing to enter across a worksheet, typing or tapping the tab key is the same deal. So when you hit the tab key, or even the right arrow key, it'll move you and enter. It'll move you to the right and enter the data at the same time. Okay, so two techniques for entering data if you've got your hands on the keyboard and you want to go a specific direction. Please remember those techniques will help you get around data entry jobs very easily and will make life a little bit better for you if you haven't already used them. As your spreadsheets get more and more and more within your workbooks, so you keep adding more spreadsheets or you inherit them, which is usually the case, getting through large areas where spreadsheets are starting to clutter along these tabs down the bottom of a workbook. Now, first off, you can buy back a little bit of space sometimes by dragging the scroll bar. See the effect there? So I've dragged it just enough as I need to be able to see the last work tab's name there. But I'm not seeing them all, because as soon as you can see these three horizontal dots, that means there's more stuff off to the left or the right that you're not seeing. Okay. Now, the use of the arrow keys will also move you across. So that's a useful technique there. Now, if I hover over this, you'll see Control and left click scrolls to the last sheet. Let's try that. Control and left click, last sheet. like it. Let's hover over this again. Control and left click now will scroll to the first sheet. And there it is. Now also hovering over here, you'll see that a right click in that scrolling area will show you all of the workbooks where I can simply double click and find the sheet I want. So a couple of whiz-bang techniques to get you across the tabs really quickly. Now, you'll see if you right-click tabs, as I did earlier, you've got the option of what to do with them, which is move and copy. Okay, now that's one thing. I find just simply clicking and dragging to move these work tabs around if you need a particular order, which I will recommend in many cases to group like tabs together. So that's a technique that we'll come to in some future lessons. So, but in the meantime, dragging a tab will move it for you. And of course, if you no longer need one, you can choose delete, but it comes with a warning. And that is, it's a permanent deletion. Now, you can retrieve an old saved file if you want to retrieve that tab, but you'll see that once I delete this blank sheet, so I'm not deleting anything unusual, I don't have an undo option. I can't undo that. So one of the few things that can't be undone in this session. But as I mentioned, with the use of Office 365 version history or a previous save file, you can recover your data that way. All right, now let's look at a nice little technique to also help with navigating around larger spreadsheets. So let's go up to the View command, and what we're referring to is this option here of Freeze Panes. Now, Freeze Panes is dependent upon where your mouse pointer has been placed. You'll see here I'm under the heading of transaction ID, but it's going to refer to this whole row here. So when I hit Freeze Panes, I have these options of freezing the top row, freezing the first column, or just freezing panes to keep rows and columns visible. Now I've chosen that. You'll see that a defined line has now appeared across the workbook, but here's the deal. If I now scroll down, my column headings stay, and if I had row headings as well, scrolling across to the right would keep them in line as well. So freeze panes, very useful technique to get familiar with. Now when we come back to the command, freeze panes becomes unfreeze panes. So that's gone away, it's not frozen anymore, and as we scroll, you'll see the headings scroll off the screen, and likewise we scroll the columns off the screen also. Now, a similar thing, but a little different, is to be able to split a screen into two or more, actually. But let's just work with two for now. I've placed my mouse pointer at the very top row for a reason, to only split into two sections. So choosing split, and this side has its own scroll bar that I can scroll around in, and this side also has its own scroll bar that I can scroll around in. It is the same workbook, the same worksheet, but I've just split it into two sections so I can move remotely to somewhere else and yet still see this top bit here. Very useful if you're referring to a cell that you want to build into a formula. So just simply clicking the split will turn it off and you're back to the one view. Now, there are a couple of other quite little useful techniques, and one is the use of the name box that I referred to earlier, and also the find command. Now, the find command has a shortcut of Control F for Windows or Command F for Mac, and it helps you find stuff somewhere in the workbook across all the sheets. So if I choose Find, and let's look here on my worksheet, I've got the word vegetables. So I wanted to find that word vegetables. Okay, now note there's some options here where I can match case, match entire cell contents, search within the sheet or the workbook by rows, and look inside formulas. So I've got a whole host of options there. So let's hit Find Next and close, and you can see that it's landed on the cell that contained vegetables. Now, if there was more, you noticed I had the option to go Find Next, Find Next, Find Next, Find Next. So very cool way to get somewhere really quickly if you know what you're looking for. Now let me introduce you to, a bit more formally, the name box. Now the name box by default has no names in it, which is a bit of a misnomer. But at first you'll notice that it does have the cell reference of the current cell. So wherever we are in the spreadsheet, it's referred to up there, which we saw earlier was quite a cool thing. Now we can actually type in there. So I could type in EE500. Guess what? Takes me to EE500. So let's quickly get back home with Control Home once again. Now the drop down arrow there, you'll see, will include some names that you may have given certain areas of a workbook or worksheets. So let's just choose this little area here, go up to our name box and just type in a name for it. It is the sales category, so let's call it sales category. Okay, you'll note I haven't got any spaces there, so hit enter. Now, let's have a look. When I choose sales category, it selects it. Wow, that could be cool. Selecting a range, introduce it into a formula. All of those things are possible. Now, let's choose one of these months, for example, and just choosing the numbers, mind. And I'll just say Jan data. Now, sometimes you might want to introduce an underscore. Just gives you a nice little way to break it up. Hit enter. Now that's Jan data. Drop it down. There it is, Jan data. So let's try a formula. Equals sum. Now, as I mentioned earlier, tab leaps you into the formula. So tab was just a way to get started where I need to be. Let's start typing Jan. There it is. It's proposing my range name, Jan data. Select it, enter it, and now I've got a sum of my Jan data. That makes more sense than sum of this range, whatever it is, C5 to C10. No, it's sum of Jan data. So creating range names can make your life a little easier, particularly when it comes to formula and also getting around. So if I choose Jan data from somewhere else in the workbook, jumps me over there. So it's another way that you can navigate around the workbook. And now we're going to look at another tool that's helpful in navigation, and that is the Go To dialog, which you can get to a couple of ways. You've got a shortcut of Control G or using the F5 function key. Now, what GoTo allows is to jump to specific cells, ranges, named areas, hence its navigational uses. but it also has a next level, and that's called Go to Special. And that allows you to go to other elements of a workbook or spreadsheet. So things that are not as in your face as going to a particular range or cell. Being a navigational tool, it is one that allows you to go to an address. Now, that's very similar to what we have here with the name box, where we were able to type in an address and go to it by just hitting enter. So what go to does is just that, allows you to go to a specific address. So F5 is probably the best way to get to it. So I've just hit it there and we've brought up that dialog box, go to. Now, first you might notice that it's all filled with these names. Now, these are the names of parts or ranges within this particular workbook. They're already created. You can create names, as we saw earlier, and use them to navigate around a spreadsheet very quickly. So you might recall from earlier we had that Jan data. So if we select Jan data as our reference, click OK, and it's jumped over to the Jan data part of this other worksheet here, conditional formatting. So let's go back to where we were. And that's one quick way to jump to a spreadsheet that you might need to work on. So you could create, for example, like a little index by naming a certain cell, possibly A1, on each sheet that you're working on with the name of the worksheets so that you can quickly flick the page to go to them. So very super useful in that respect. Now, as I said earlier, it's very much like the name box, so we can just type any particular reference, EE500, for example, hit enter, and guess what? It takes us to EE500. So Control Home takes us straight back to our cell A1. So very cool way to do things is using the F5 function key. Go to. As also mentioned, GoTo does have some particular uses beyond just that little navigational aspect. So I'm going to call up GoTo once again. Now, within the spreadsheets little list here, used to come to this sort of scenario quite a lot. And that is where people used to put spaces between the data, thinking it was making it stand out more, making it a bit more legible. Very much misguided in that way because the data can't be sorted properly. It can't be tabulated in a good way. So if we're counting or not counting this or that, and there's a whole range of reasons why we don't wish to present our data with these rows spacing them out. With GoTo, the special button, which allows us to go to a whole range of stuff. You can see them all listed here. Now, I won't go through each and every one today, but let's look at a few ones that I think you might find the most useful. So we've got these blanks between us, and you might guess where I'm headed here. I'm going to select the range of cells where I wish to get rid of those blank rows there. So once again, hitting F5 to go to. Let's click on that special button and blanks. If we click that and hit OK, what have we done? We have selected just the blank rows in between those bits and pieces that we wish to retain. So if we right click there, we now have an option to delete those and shift those cells up, click OK, and we've now collapsed that set of data, got rid of those errant blanks, and now we can work with this in a much neater way. So Nice little technique there to get rid of blanks in between data. Now, another technique you can use that go to special for is to isolate where you might have constants, which is just data that's entered, so not formulas, like just numbers, just text, and so on. Or formulas. You can find out where all your formulas are. So let's have a crack at that, shall we? So I'm just going to select this little range here, calling up F5, go to once again, and special. And let's look at selecting the constants first. So note you can then choose what constants you wish to show. Click OK and see the pattern here. So we've got all this has been entered manually as such, but here is our formulas that are skirting around the outside. Now we can reverse that selection. So I'll select that data once again, function F5, and let's select formulas this time. Click OK, and that's the reverse selection. So with the formulas selected, you can do any number of things. Actually, just note that they're there, and you could format them. You can do a host of other things. But notice we have that selected, but one of them is the current cell of that selection. And being in there, we can see what the actual formula is. Now, if you hit the Enter key, a little bit of magic, it will just move through that area to show you what's in each of those formulas. So notice it does jump. Once we get to here, jumps to the beginning of the road, but be prepared for that. And you can then double check where a formula error might be or what's actually in a formula if you're looking at a spreadsheet that you've just inherited, for example. So super cool, that one. And that's a very good example of utilizing GoTo Special. So I would invite you to explore the other options, see what's there, and have a crack at using F5, GoTo. It's a super tool to use for navigation. Okay, now for a what potentially is a very small topic, there's a lot of stuff in there. So I hope there was something in there for you, whether you're new or have been messing around with Excel for a little while. So feel free to like and subscribe if you like this content. It will really help me to present more Excel tricks and traps for everyone. And I hope once again that you got something out of that and you're able to put it to good use at your workplace. Okay, bye for now, and I'll see you on the next one.